Hi everyone, I'm Emma.
And I'm Dominique. We run Yellow Door Collective, a full-service marketing agency based in Cape Town, South Africa. Welcome to our podcast, Life Behind the Yellow Door.
When we met almost a decade ago, we had no idea what was in store for us. But we soon realized that common values and aspirations are a solid basis for a partnership.
In this podcast, we'll share some of our journey as entrepreneurs and new generation agency owners in South Africa. What really happens behind the yellow door. We hope to inspire you with honest and authentic conversations about running an agency, the life of being an entrepreneur, and featuring chats with the people who have shaped our world.
So welcome to episode 5, and thanks for joining us again. In our last episode, we dragged Dom's husband, Tristan, in. I think he actually enjoyed it in the end, but he shared some great stories from our early days and sort of gave that life behind the yellow door inside scoop that people are often interested in. Mm-hmm. So please take a listen if you missed it.
Cool. And we're excited to welcome another guest to our table today, Vanessa Clark. She's known Em for many years, but also we have been collaborating for a few years now as well. And she's an industry expert in marketing and tech, and it's going to be quite interesting to hear what she has to say. She's been working as a freelance journalist for many years and a PR agent, and now works at Jumo World, a tech company that's doing impressive things in the finance industry.
And today, I think we're just really looking forward to talking about her career journey and her insights into the world of marketing.
Sure. Hi, Dom, and hi, Em. Thank you so much for having me. So interesting that we're talking about change, because we are literally speaking in my first 2 months of changing from 11 years as a freelancer. And we met sort of in year 1 of my 11 year. And in that time, we've also collaborated. So I have a very long and fond history with YDC, and I'm a big fan. So I have just shifted from being a freelancer and a freelance journalist, although I'll tell you a little bit about kind of what that actually means in real life, to working full-time at Jumo, as you mentioned, which is a fintech company doing amazing things to extend financial inclusion. And I've been speaking for a bit now, and I completely forgot what you wanted me to say.
Just about your career journey.
Okay, so I can't take any credit for any massive strategic thought, but a million years ago, in the last century, I was offered the opportunity to do this thing called new media and learn this thing called HTML. And I remember thinking to myself, 19-year-old Vanessa went, sure, I hope this internet thing stays, because I'm really taking a little bit of a risk here. Maybe I should be doing TV or radio. It had new in the word, so I went with it. And that resulted in me working on one of the first online publications in the UK, focusing on technology. And when it was still called telecoms, it wasn't called technology or ICT at that point. And this was before Google and before Facebook. And I would turn up at press conferences and people would say, great, so you're an online publication, but can you just pop a copy in the post to us? And that sort of
typical.
Yeah, and that sort of set the foundation for, I guess, being open to change, which is a good thing nowadays. And for my fascination with the technology world, but also my very content-driven approach to marketing. As a freelance journalist nowadays, you really do a lot of corporate writing. So you are working as a marketeer, really. And that's something that's been quite useful through my career.
Cool. And what are some of the biggest shifts that you've seen or that have affected you personally over the years?
So I think definitely what's happening in the media space. I saw a stat the other day that in South Africa, in the last 10 years, 10,000 people in the media industry have been retrenched in some way, some shape or form. Yeah. So what's happening in marketing speak, I guess the earned media world is really interesting and having an impact on companies. And there absolutely are opportunities, but it's also, the flip side is that it's kind of a challenging space to be in. For instance, freelance journalists are still earning the same word count they earned 15, 20 years ago. That is not sustainable. So So newsrooms are a lot more junior. There's a lot more demand for people to do a lot of things. So the specialists aren't there anymore. And so one thing is absolutely your adaptability. If you can do more than one thing is always a good thing. Yeah. But I think what this means for companies, and what I certainly saw in the last 5 years, kind of shifting from pure PR to, let's call it corporate journalism, is the opportunity for companies to put really good content out into the world. That hasn't changed, and we'll probably chat about that a little bit more later. Good content is still incredibly valuable. And I guess the positive side of all these journalists not working in newsrooms anymore is that there are incredible journalists out there who can help you craft that message.
Yeah, I think that's something we've really benefited from at Yellow Door, is having incredible writers as part of our team. I often describe one of our key services as digital storytelling, because it's something we love doing. But linked to that, and I think something you haven't touched on yet, Vanessa, is how strategy influences any sort of PR content type work. A project we collaborated on last year for Conservation Travel Africa was a sort of 2-day workshop, just really unpacking where are they going, what is their vision, what message do they want to put out there. And I think that's something we can talk about in terms of trends and how that's becoming more and more important, maybe because it is a more competitive space. And for a brand to stand out, their message needs to be clear as well as well crafted.
Absolutely. I mean, there are more channels than ever before. If you think about 5-10 years ago, what could you do? You could do above the line advertising, you could do below the line, you could do PR, in traditional media. Now there are so many more channels. Everybody's a publisher. A lot of it you can do yourself. I mean, they're podcasts. I'm a big fan of podcasts. Look at the rise of podcasts in the last definitely in the last year in South Africa. And sadly, it's kind of symptomatic of how busy our roads are. But I think everyone's listening to podcasts when they're stuck in the traffic.
Yeah.
So, kind of interesting.
Good for you guys.
Interesting thing there. But absolutely, I think because there is now so much opportunity to get your content out, whether it's good or bad, there's definitely so much noise. There is definitely overload. There's definitely fighting for attention. And so what you were saying about digital storytelling and nailing the strategy is so important, because that's where telling an authentic story that resonates starts. And if you're just going to be kind of ticking boxes and going with the flow and reading the latest top 10 things you need to do to win on Instagram, it's not going to resonate as much. It's not going to be sustainable, and it's not going to create that connection with your audience. And interesting, this definitely another shift I've seen, and something I feel quite strongly about, is this applies as much to B2B marketing as it does to B2C. It's been really cool kind of seeing the B2C, the business to consumer kind of thinking and all that real deep brand and authentic brand work being applied by business to business marketers to get their business story across. Because at the end of the day, we're all people. You're always selling or marketing or educating a person.
Absolutely. When we first started Yellow Door, we sort of said we wanted to focus on the B2C space, but quickly realized that. And I think a lot of that came from working with you and realizing that the B2B space absolutely is about people. It's about connection, and being able to do that well is a skill we've definitely sort of focused on improving. So we've talked about B2B and B2C and the different kind of ways to approach that. But I think something we can come back to is, what an agency structure is like now, and what it was like before, and what changes you've kind of noticed along the way.
So there's more choice. And that's always a double-edged sword, because there isn't a default anymore. So you, as a brand, and even as an agency, as like YDC running an agency, there isn't a default position anymore. You have to figure out the best way that works for you and your clients, and for your clients, which is good, because that means you're going to get better results. But it does mean a little bit of trial and error, and also a little bit of thinking quite hard about how things work. I've always been a fan of smaller agencies. I've always only consulted to smaller agencies, and I believe they do better work. I think one of the best things an agency can do is really get inside their client's head and work with them. Echoing what we were saying earlier, really working with them from ground zero on that authentic brand, because everything comes from there. That storytelling comes from there. That decision on what you're going to do, of all these choices, of all these channels and tactics and options. Exactly. And that takes willing from the clients as well, because they need to trust their agency. And it might be a few agencies, and it might be a few agencies and a few consultants. And the more brains around the table and the more different viewpoints around the table, the better the result. But that takes management, and it takes thought, and it takes consideration, and it takes working at it. It's not just the defaults don't apply anymore. So again, you don't just tick boxes anymore, but you do get better results.
Yeah, and I like what you said about working with different agencies and different consultants. So something we really enjoy is bringing in experts. And you mentioned, whether you're doing something in-house or how big teams are and how that's shifted. And in some ways, it feels like it's come full circle over the last decade or so of bringing in consultants, having a big in-house team, going back to using consultants. Do you see a kind of trend there or a pattern?
So what I was seeing a lot in the last year was almost collaborations of freelancers. Some of the best and most effective work I'd done was with a couple of freelancers all working towards the same thing with a client. And that model specifically worked for those clients, and it's an option, but it's certainly a way to get the right people around the table and get the people with the specific skills you need, not somebody who's expected to do everything. Especially I spent a lot of my time in the technology space, and quite sort of deep technology. So you really do need domain experts there. You need somebody with context, with background, and with the ability to ask the right questions. So it's not something that you kind of shift in and then shift out and work on a B2C brand the next day. So that is a good way to really get those, back to what we were saying before, really get those experts working on your brand and your story.
And for people kind of new to the industry, what advice would you give them about how to decide whether to specialize, whether to consult, whether to join an agency?
I would always recommend that people do their time either in an agency or in-house, especially if they want to potentially freelance or do their own thing. Do their time, treat it as a boot camp, treat it as an extension of your tertiary education, doing your time in-house or in an agency and just learning the ropes, learning what you don't like, learning what you do like, learning what works and what doesn't work. Something about working in South Africa is that it's reasonably easy, and I say this with all the privilege of being a Cape Townian. It's quite easy to build a network, and you start building that network if you're doing your time in this kind of agency / in-house boot camp. I would say if you want to I would say specialize. That's just my personality. I love it. I love going down those rabbit holes. But choose wisely. Don't choose something that you hate. If you're going to be reading white papers or legislation, Emma and I have spent many hours reading the Consumer Protection Act in previous lives. That just popped back in my head. What a fun memory. If you're going to be spending the time becoming a domain expert, don't choose something you hate, because your life will be very sad.
Yeah, we talked about that this morning with the team about how it's easier to work on clients that you love or that you resonate with. And I think that definitely applies to specializing. Don't do it too early. Do something you love, but you can also specialize you can still have a finger on the pulse and what else is going on. So you specialized in tech, yet you collaborated on some of our projects that were in conservation and, new marketplaces launching. And I think it's just having that ability to still use your approach in a different industry.
Absolutely. That's such a really good point. It's almost like a matrix, right? It's your subject area specialization and then your, what should we call it, your skill specialization, or your what you actually physically do. So in Conservation Travel Africa's case, exactly that. It was the branding and the brand story. And I took what I'd learned working on more tech brands and brought it into that conversation. But likewise, what I learned there in that with that clients and with the conversations we had and the way things unfolded and what you always learning, right? I can take that back to my other clients. So that is. There was a point there.
You find a synergy.
Yes.
You find a synergy
able
between
to bring them to each other.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of a flow. But just try and choose things you enjoy doing.
And going back to when you had started out, what do you wish you'd known then that you didn't know and you wish you'd known?
Oh, good question. Save my articles. I think that you kind of never think that, maybe it's the internet, right? So they're going to be there forever, but I'm not sure that they are. What else?
You shared something with me recently, which I thought was so interesting. You said when you were younger, you always wanted a better job title or more responsibility. And now you've got to the point where you actually just want to do a job you love and are good at, and sort of more niche, which I guess speaks to what you were saying about specializing, but it's not about the title.
Absolutely. Thank you for remembering that. And that is something I think it's a wider workspace shift that I've certainly seen over my career. Is when I started out, you were kind of programmed or trained that to succeed is you taking over your boss's job, which is a very weird dynamic if you think about it. And yes, that's how you get, that shows you've done the work and got the experience, and then you get the job title and the salary and all of that. And you also end up managing a team, which is fine if that's what you want to do, but not if what you really love doing is the work and working with other people. So that was something very interesting
what you wish for, I guess.
Exactly, you really, really do. And so it's very difficult for me to say, and I think it is the case that has changed. There is more space for people to be specialists and to be recognized and rewarded for that without going, the only way you're successful is do you have a team of 20 under you? Because I certainly don't want that. If that's what you want, all the best to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've jumped around a little bit and we've talked about all sorts of things, but I think something that we're all three passionate about is the world of digital. So let's unpack that a bit and see where it takes us.
So I'm so pleased you asked that, because when I was thinking about, what it would be cool to speak about today, I was coming in here sort of guns blazing, doubling down on digital and going, digital is where it's at. Like, who even watches TV anymore? And then I was chatting to a colleague of mine I'm like dead center Gen X, and he's a millennial. And he said he wasn't on any social media. And I was like, but how do you get invited places? I don't understand. But this really it's increasingly a trend. It's a trend. It's a little bit awkward kind of making these sweeping generalizations about generations, but definitely millennials, which is a very, very important market for any brand, are switching off on social media, and cleverly so. I mean, I feel like my generation, because we didn't grow up with online, we've kind of got sucked into it. So that dopamine hit comes out of nowhere, and we just got addicted to
Instagram
it.
fix.
Right. Did it even happen if it wasn't on Instagram? So there's that sort of the millennial kind of going, what value is this adding to my life? Plus, when you think about the heightened awareness around privacy, the things that we've seen happen, this is not just a threat anymore, it is actual data leaks, Cambridge Analytica, what we're seeing happening with Facebook and their cryptocurrency Libra and how it all sort of ties together. And in South Africa, it was about a week or two ago, or not in South Africa, in the world a week or two ago, when WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook's images went down. Because they were the same. It was really, really quite astonishing. So then I was like, wow, what does that mean for my big doubling down on digital? So I was saying to this person, I mean, it's not like you're living in a vacuum. You still know what's going on in the world. You have opinions and you're up to date with things. How does that happen? So we had a very interesting conversation about gatekeeping the information that comes to you. And that's something that I do quite a lot as well, which kind of results in me living in a bit of an echo chamber, but never mind. Gatekeeping the information and which media you allow to come to you, but also relying a lot on your friends and your trusted peer group to tell you about the important things that you need to know about. And like I was saying earlier, I mean, these friends could be people you've never met before, or could be people that live on the opposite side of the world. You still trust them. So that got me thinking that it goes back to the same thing, doesn't it? If you look at it, let's flip it and look at it from the brand's point of view. The brand still needs to be focusing on their authentic story that resonates, gets out there, does all the, the marketing thing. We all learn the marketing thing, the attention, interest, desire, and action, or whichever acronym you learned. But they've got to work harder, because not only do they need to connect with that customer needs to do more than just be a brand ambassador. They almost need to amplify their message, almost be a channel to people who are not online. So maybe it's because I'm from the past, but it just was kind of reassuring that in some ways it is the basic principles still hold true. Yeah, but you can completely understand why things have got a little bit wild, where there
Out of control, really.
where there are so many choices and so many things you have to do and so many options, that it is completely understandable that it's quite overwhelming. But I think if you take it back to basics,
Basic principles.
We also talk about how we connect the digital space to offline campaigns with marketing, so making it tangible for the customer. And I think that's really important. We talked about that today as well, about, have an online campaign, but have a way for people to engage with you, get to know the people behind the brand.
All the different touch points that you can do, so that the customer feels like it's consistent and you feel the brand throughout.
absolutely, because people like people, right? Yeah. And that doesn't change, and people like people's stories.
So this conversation has reminded me of a few different things we've been talking about this week, actually, and that is just the desire to know why, or care why we're doing what we're doing in this world of marketing. And I think for us, and I speak for Emma and I here, I think that we just want to be able to know that we're making some kind of difference or change in the world, and not just feeding someone's bottom line. And I do think that speaks to what you were saying about people not wanting to just be online for the sake of it. There needs to be a reason. There needs to be something that you're actually gaining from it. And I think that doesn't mean that we have to stop doing what we're doing, because there's always a story to tell, or a community to build. And those communities are important. And we've seen countless case studies of why digital still is relevant. But yeah, it is interesting to have that in mind when you're thinking about, especially a job that you want that job to actually mean something.
So we're going to give Vanessa a quick break while we do our regular features, and then we'll wrap up with key takeouts from this chat.
Spot the trend. So today's Spot the Trend, I have been reading up on hyper-personalization. So it's a very big word, or two, but I don't think it's too... I think it's pretty easy to understand. Basically, personalization in terms of marketing has been the kinds of things that you do with your newsletters, like Dear Emma, and that's a personalization you can do for marketing. But with hyper-personalization, it's gotten to the point where everything is listening to you and understanding you in a broader sense, and is trying to understand what your needs are as a customer. And for example, Netflix will give you shows that they think that you should watch based on your previous experience or previous things that you've watched. So that's one example of hyper-personalization. Another one that I can think of in my own experience is your grocery store will give you personalized vouchers based on what you've bought with your rewards card. So it's it's a simple concept, but I think that it's becoming more and more involved based on all the things that we are now doing, which is quite scary and cool. Do you have any thoughts?
I do. I've been racking my brain to see which clients we could apply it to, as always. And I think an interesting one would be the Kitchen Collective, who do cooking classes. So if you signed up, for example, for a Thai cooking class, they could say, you may also be interested in the following. So we were chatting to them about, do we need to give halal, vegetarian, vegan options, and we decided not to because we didn't want to eliminate their friends and family that may be interested in something in the newsletter. But I do think having sort of a broad introduction saying these are our upcoming courses, but we think you will like, and having that more personalized sort of element following on could work really well. I think retail clients, absolutely. I think shopping habits are something to be more aware of and more tailored.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it would be fun to explore how we could do it within our own business and with our customers. So one of the things we focus on is how do we upsell or cross-sell our services to clients that are happy and we want to continue to work with. And that could also be something we bring into our matrix of, when we're pitching or looking to do that, like how do we personalize it even further?
Yeah.
So I think an example we can refer to, which we've used, is Nando's. Dom and I love to get a healthy quarter chicken and mealies for lunch. And when I phone to order, they ask my number and literally ask if I'd like the same order as last time, which does save time, and you always feel like they know what you want.
Yeah.
So that's a cool one. I think another one would love to have the opportunity to work on is with someone in the online education space. So looking at short courses and if someone's already signed up for something, what else they might be interested in.
And also not just what other courses, but add-ons based on what they've studied. So maybe they then give them an email with a whole bunch of job specs that people have sent through based on that short course. Something that's all-encompassing. I think that's the thing about hyper-personalization is that our world is becoming so data-filled that we are all, like, everything in the world is connected. And so if you have different things that the AI or the internet learns about you, it can then spew out different examples of things that you might need.
So being strategic and linking it all together.
Yeah, exactly.
Your questions answered. So one of the questions we've been asked is, what is a typical day in a small agency? So Dom, over to you to start with that one.
Yeah, so I'll go in a general sense for our agency. We all communicate a lot during the day, whether it's with clients, with each other, and we have different touch points. So we communicate internally on Slack, and we communicate with clients over email or on the phone. So there's a lot going on all the time. But a typical day has different segments. So we usually come in and start by checking email and making sure there's nothing urgent to be dealt with immediately. We have a Pakira, which is what we call our focus time between 10:30 and 12. So then is where we really bed down on strategic things or things that need headspace. And then everyone's different, so it depends on what they when they have their headspace as to whether they carry on in their big tasks or whether they do their smaller tasks in the afternoon. So that's kind of how our days work. But in terms of the actual work,
what actually happens, so that varies from person to person. In my role as leading new business and strategy, I meet or chat to a new client almost every day, so that takes quite a lot of planning and energy to be really sort of attentive to what they want and make sure we pitching at the right level. When it comes to strategy, we love doing that as a team, so we'll sit and brainstorm on the whiteboard, always looking at what we're trying to achieve, who the target audience is, and mapping that out. And we've probably got internal meetings most days. So sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's learning a new skill or way of doing something, or a morning scrum. So I think it's a nice way to bring everyone together.
Yeah. So another question we got was how we deal with demanding clients. And we have had some experience with this over the last almost 5 years.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think Dom and I both have woo as part of one of our top 5 strengths. So that's winning others over. And I think it's really just about trying to understand what the real root of the problem is, addressing that, staying calm, being rational. And something we've implemented, which has really helped, is to give each new client a welcome pack, which explains our approach, how we work, what to expect, timelines, what's included from a budget point of view, who their point of contact is. And I think clarifying that all up front does manage expectations. It doesn't eliminate difficult clients, but it gets everyone on the same playing field.
Yeah. And what we do also is that we set our boundaries quite early on. So in that welcome pack, but also, if people are being demanding about our time, we try and explain to them that, we try to have work-life balance, and that we won't be necessarily replying to emails or messages after hours. We have a work number, WhatsApp number, so that we don't have to give our personal numbers out, as we do feel like there should be some separation between work and personal life. It doesn't always work, but that's the goal. But what are your takeouts from this chat we've had?
You're me.
Em?
I've really, really enjoyed this time to kind of stop and think about what we all do. And it's really reminded me about the importance of storytelling and authenticity, and that it's okay to be a Marmite brand, that people either love you or don't love you so much, as long as you know your brand, you know what you are, you know what you're not, and you tell that story.
And I love that we have the opportunity to tell those stories. I think people get caught up in wanting to be on trend, but for us it's more, as Dom was saying, like, how do we add value? How do we really make a difference? And the platforms we do that on will change, but the reason we do it will stay the same.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Life Behind the Yellow Door. We'd love to hear from you. So if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, pop us a message via our social media pages @HelloYellowDoor, and we'll do our best to answer them in upcoming episodes.